A three-way war could start between the United States and China. Weikel mize Amaya. If war breaks out between the United States and China, the South China Sea is most likely to occur. China's disputes with its neighboring maritime territorial claims, its threat to take back Taiwan by force, and general tensions in the region after more than a decade of intimidation, harassment, and military buildup have created the premise for a conflict in the East Sea. East Sea, whether anyone wants it or not. Below are three hypothetical scenarios that would see the seas become a battleground for the two most powerful nations on Earth. In 2017, China pushed to expand its territorial claims to include Second Thomas Scholl, part of the Spratly archipelago and just 295 nautical miles from the Philippines. Chinese Marines attempted to intimidate Philippine Marines stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre amphibious ship by holding a live-fire exercise nearby, but the exercise was mistaken for an attack. Labor. Philippine Marines returned fire, causing casualties, and Philippine fighter jets damaged a Chinese Type 071 landing dock. Poor damage control resulted in the loss of major warships and heavy loss of life, an embarrassing incident that outraged the Chinese Communist Party. As both sides grew tense, the conflict expanded to include China's Shandong aircraft carrier conducting airstrikes on Philippine airfields and China's cruise missiles attacking military bases in the archipelago island. The United States, citing its mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, dispatched a Marine regiment and a Marine expeditionary unit, supported by two carrier strike groups and B-1 bombers, stationed in Guam, to occupy Chinese-held Subi Reef. The air forces and navies of the US and China will be directly involved. The two forces are drawn into an endless conflict that no one wants and no one knows how to stop. Strategic and international, told Popular Mechanics, the United States will fight to the fullest extent of its capabilities. The problem for the US is that they don't have bases nearby. They will have to project power from Japan, Okinawa, Guam, or Australia, he said. However, Kansian explained, the recent signing of agreements with the Philippines gives the United States access to 9 bases. That can help a lot. If the Philippine government agrees, the US can use airports and ports to control the area. It will still be a tough fight because China is much closer to the region than the United States. Scenario number 2, invasion of Taiwan. China believes that Taiwan, a self-governing island nation located 100 miles off the coast, is a rebellious part of China that needs to be brought back under Beijing's control. In 2030, after 2 decades of building up an invasion force, the People's Republic of China begins to invade Taiwan. The invasion got off to a bad start, with inexperienced Chinese military forces attempting to complete what for any army would have been a complex and difficult operation. American forces suffered defeat when military bases in Japan and Guam were attacked by Chinese precision-guided munitions. After a month, the war was not going the way anyone wanted. Chinese forces had established a foothold on the island but were unable to bring in reinforcements due to American submarines sinking transport ships in the Strait. Taiwan's forces are under constant bombardment and cannot push Chinese troops out to sea, and the US cannot use its heavy firepower, in the form of aircraft carrier strike groups and heavy bombers. Heavy, to counter Chinese targets. To pressure China to stop the war, the United States Marine Corps, with support from the United States Army, embarked on an island invasion campaign in the South China Sea. One by one, the Chinese islands, stripped of air and naval support after the long war in Taiwan, fell under the control of the Marines. As the situation became more serious, Beijing was forced to withdraw its forces from the Taiwan battlefield to deal with the advancing Marines. The ultimate goal is to force China to halt its aggression to protect its assets in the South China Sea, although America's own commanders are pushing for victory on both fronts. Scenario number 3, distraction breaks down. Chinese military forces began threatening and eventually opened fire on Vietnamese forces tracking Beijing's survey ships in waters claimed by both sides in the South China Sea. The fighting escalated into a full-scale conflict in the air and at sea, although the land border between the two countries remained relatively calm. Why did the U.S. aircraft carrier visit Vietnam? What initially began as a limited military operation aimed at rallying Chinese people across the country and the party has now spiraled out of control. The aircraft carrier was hit. The sinking led to the mobilization of the Chinese military and the possibility that it could cross the border into Vietnam. To prevent the invasion, the United States warned that it might join the conflict on Vietnam's side, using the 7th Fleet stationed in Japan to protect Vietnam's maritime flank. The Navy and Marine Corps prepare for a campaign to occupy China's islands in the South China Sea, but there is disagreement about what will happen next and how to end the war. A war in the East Sea would be extremely destructive. It may also not initially involve the United States, but will eventually force Washington to take a stand, either in principle or in response to international treaty commitments. A war can begin without any of the participants knowing how it will end, with the specter of US and Chinese nuclear arsenals hanging over the battlefield. If war breaks out in the South China Sea, the whole world will hold its breath for good reason. Kyle Mize. Kyle Mize is a writer on defense and security issues and has worked at Popular Mechanics since 2015. If it involves explosions or bullets, he's generally in favor of it. Kyle's articles have appeared in the Daily Beast, U.S. Naval Institute News, The Diplomat, Foreign Policy, Combat Aircraft Monthly, Vice News.